Hi everyone, welcome to our Greater Than series. My name is Amy Roger and I'm from Olive Tree Church. So I'm really excited to be sharing with you today on communication, but more importantly than communicating, actually about the process of communicating the truth of what is going on inside of you. So we're going to be looking over the course of the next 15 minutes at various styles of communication and how we can either communicate out of a base of fear, and when we communicate off of a base of fear, what that often can look like is that our fear becomes greater than the love that we're communicating. Conversely, what we should be aiming for in communicating is that we're operating off of a basis of love, and therefore the love is greater than the fear that we communicate or the fear that we feel when we're communicating. So let's start with just talking about communication. So communication is the process of transferring information from one person to another. So it should be really simple, right? Because I'm pretty sure this is what we all do all day in various avenues of work and home. But it gets pretty complicated and we've managed to mess it up quite consistently. And I'm pretty sure that a lot of you will know that various organizations even hire communication experts to help them with the process of how to do communication well. So we really should be getting this right because it should be simple. I think most marriage courses that I've either read material from or heard about have got a pretty sizey chapter on communication. There again, just reflecting to us that we really do need help in terms of how we communicate. Jesus says to us that out of the abundance of our hearts, our mouth speaks. So essentially he's saying that whatever is inside of our heart is coming out of our mouth. So if love is inside of our heart, love is going to come out of our mouth. And if fear is inside of our heart, fear is going to come out of our mouth. It's a pretty vivid picture that he draws, actually. And seeing as though we don't only communicate verbally with our words, but most of you will know that 70% of our communication is based on our nonverbal cues. Whether you're using your words to communicate or your nonverbal body language, facial expressions, tone, people are going to be hearing loud and clear if you're coming off of a basis of love when you communicate, or if you're coming off of a basis of fear when you communicate. And I think that this is why we need so much help with it, because for a lot of us, without knowing it, we end up communicating off of a basis of fear and self-protection. So the ways we communicate and the goals that we're trying to achieve in communicating aren't what they should be. They've gotten all warped and pretty messed up, to be honest. So just to start off with, the healthiest goal that we should be starting off of when we're thinking about communication, what we should be aiming to do is to create understanding. I'm going to say that again because it's one of the most important things that you're going to hear me say. The goal of our communication should be to create understanding, not to create agreement. And I'm pretty sure if you just do 2 minutes of self-reflection now and think about the most intimate conversations that you have with those people that you love the most, often the road that we end up going down is that we try to get someone to agree with us rather than trying to understand what they're trying to communicate to us. So if we think about what we often end up doing, which is when we try to make the goal of communication agreement, what do we think is going to happen when we disagree, which is a very real picture, a reality of what happens to most of us on a day-to-day basis. We disagree in our communication. And disagree we will because you can be quite sure that the person that you're communicating with is definitely not the same person as you. They don't have the same likes, dislikes, the same tastes, anything like that. So what ends up happening is that you will be trying really hard to communicate something to your partner, and it will feel like not a single thing that you're saying is really being heard. And the only thing it seems that they are hearing are the things that they disagree with. And they're making that really loud and clear as they throw back little disagreement darts at you. And that ends up being really frustrating, really painful, and often breaking down the connection that you have with the person that you're communicating with. Okay, so if we think practically, if understanding is the goal of our communication, how do we actually do that? How do we make understanding the goal of communicating? The first thing that we need to do is that we need to listen. And everything in our culture these days is counterintuitive to helping us to grow listening as an actual life skill. if I think back to my high school years and different courses that I see in my kids' homework books coming home, it's all about how can I teach my children to talk more so that they can win conversations, so that they can win competitions. How can I talk more to do better at my job? How can I do Toastmasters better? How can I do better presentations? So very few of the things that we learn these days have to do with listening, and this really is the starting point for being able to understand what is going on when you're communicating with someone. Listening. Okay, so if listening is forming part of the basis for our understanding and communication, the way that I can help you to understand me better in our communication is if I can tell you what is going on inside of me. And that needs to be my solitary commitment throughout our entire communication process, that I am committed to telling you only what is going on inside of me and not presuming that I know what is going on inside of you. So if you were to imagine that every time you communicate, your insides are changing color mysteriously, kind of like a dipstick that you use to check pH levels. But the responsibility for you in your communication is to check your internal colors and your internal levels, and then for you only to communicate those things to your communication partner. Now, I know all of this sounds easy, but what we frequently do in communicating is that we tell the other person what is going on inside of them, instead of just communicating what is going on inside of me. So even though you might be really good at reading into people, and even though you might have the spiritual gift of discernment, even though you might be prophetic in nature, and you reckon you can call out giftings and what is going on inside of a person, even though you might have been married for 22 years and you have woken up for 22 years in bed next to this person, you still do not have the right to tell that person what is going on inside of them when you are communicating with them. The only thing that you should be responsible for is for telling them what is going on inside of you. So, to communicate well, we need to make understanding the goal. We need to listen only to what is going on inside of our partner as they tell us, and then we need to communicate back to them appropriately what is going on inside of us. And now during this process, you're probably going to feel somewhere along the way like all you really want to do is get the person that you're communicating with to agree with you, because that's been the way that you've done it for so long that it kind of just kicks into us. Okay, I need to get you to agree with me, but that isn't where you want to go. At this stage, it's really important when we're communicating with someone that we send the right messages and the right message to make sure that communication happens and that understanding is happening along the way. And you will see that as you communicate your care for the person in the process of a conversation, you will see the levels of intimacy will increase and anxiety, conversely, will decrease. Now, there are obviously communication styles that do not lower anxiety and then they actually increase anxiety. And one of these communication styles we could call the passive communicator. So one of those styles being the passive communicator. The passive communicators attempt to convince the entire world that they don't have needs. That there's basically no needs going on inside of here. I don't desire anything. I don't need you to give me anything. I don't need you to tell me anything. But all I want to do is I just want to serve you. What can I do to make your day more enjoyable? Oh, sure, we're going to a restaurant. No, I don't mind where we sit. Where would you like to sit? Oh, no, I don't mind what we eat for breakfast, lunch, dinner, dessert. What do you want to eat for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and dessert? Passive communicators basically try to not exist, although that isn't what they ultimately desire, but that is the communication style that they present with. When they're faced with a joint decision in a relationship, as I said, the whole time they will deflect to their partner. No, what you said didn't hurt me. I'm fine. And I know you're upset, so it's really okay, don't worry. Passive communicators essentially become eternal justifiers of other people's behavior. Somehow a passive person thinks that by devaluing themselves, that they are actually peacekeepers, and that every relationship needs one, surely. passive communicators believe that the other person that they're communicating with is actually greater than they are. If I'm a passive communicator, part of the reason why I withhold the truth, why I let fear come out of my heart instead of love, why I don't actually tell you what is going on inside of me, is because I am scared of being seen as a needy person, because I'm scared that you won't be able to meet my needs, because I'm scared of what you will think of me, and sometimes because passive communicators haven't developed an ability to be able to communicate what they're actually feeling inside of them. I'm afraid as a passive communicator that someone will think that I am selfish for telling them what I need or what is going on inside of me. Now, totally conversely to the passive communicator, we have the aggressive communicator. The aggressive communicator's core belief is I matter and you don't. What I want, I will get. I am the loudest, biggest, and scariest communicator in the room. Aggressive communicators know how to get what they want every single time. If we were to kind of imagine communicators on a food chain, you could say that an aggressive communicator would be like a T-Rex, and a passive communicator would be like a goat at the bottom of the food chain. And whenever I think of a T-Rex and a goat in the same situation, I kind of go back to that like original Jurassic Park movie, and there's this like dark, rainy scene, and the T-Rex grabs the goat out of the grass and like munch, crunch, he's dead. And that actually is exactly what happens in real life when you have an aggressive and passive communicator together. And ironically, what frequently happens is that the passive communicator and the aggressive communicator get married in perfect harmony, the goat and the T-Rex. And that picture of Jurassic Park is actually what really happens. You'll be in conversation, it'll be okay, all of a sudden anxiety will increase, things will get stormy and dark and rainy and scary, the goat will start cowering, the T-Rex will bend over and take body part by body part off of the goat. The goat has actually very willingly relinquished your body parts to the T-Rex, and the T-Rex at the end of that conversation is still hungry. The reason why the T-Rex and the goat end up in a relationship together so often is because their communication patterns sync. They have the same core belief. They both agree that the T-Rex matters and that the goat doesn't matter. And this type of communication dynamic will send anxiety levels through the roof because the unequal power and value balance doesn't line up, and this will totally eliminate all intimacy within the relationship. Both the aggressive communicator and the passive communicator are actually both powerless because they are unable to understand the truth and unable to express the truth of what is going on inside of them. Both of them are expressing communication off of a fear base. Their fear is greater than the love which they are able to communicate. Then the third style of communicators that we often see is the passive-aggressive communicator. And I could probably say that this style of communication is the most sophisticated and therefore the most devious of the three styles. It is the worst of being passive and it is the worst of being aggressive. So the kind of thing that you'll experience when you're in conversation with a passive-aggressive communicator is that they'll say, "Sure, that's not a problem," to your face while you're communicating. Shortly afterwards, they'll head outside and key your car. They'll use sarcastic innuendos, manipulative use of scripture, and judgments that they will try to make come across in the form of counsel, but what they're actually really just doing is withholding love. Because passive-aggressive communicators can often have a veneer of civility and that they have some kind of social skills, it is often hard for people on the outside of the communication triangle to really see or understand what is going on. So someone who is trying to get counsel from someone who's trying to get counsel because of the relationship dynamics that are going on with the passive aggressive person that they're with. Often they will feel misunderstood, like no one really gets them. People from the outside looking in will kind of think that that person is crazy, because when the passive aggressive communicator is in public, everything seems to be great. But it's what they're doing in private with their partner, the kind of words and language and judgments that they're making, that actually end up crushing the person. Passive-aggressive communicators often become jealous of anything that their partners are doing that doesn't revolve directly around them. So the passive-aggressive communicator, the passive communicator, and the aggressive communicator, these are our three most frequent communication styles that we see. And as I mentioned earlier, these three styles of communication really are based on fear, although it's not our intention. That's what we end up communicating out of. In contrast, the only love-based communication style that we have that can counteract any three of these other three styles is the assertive communicator. The core belief of an assertive communicator is that you matter, and so do I. We equally matter, both you and your opinions and your feelings and your needs, and so do I matter the same as you and my feelings and my needs and my desires. We both matter. Assertive communicators refuse to be in relationships where both people that are communicating together don't have. Assertive communicators refuse to be in relationships with people where both people do not have an equal and high value. They are not afraid of what is going on inside of them. And because they're not afraid of what is going on inside of them, they're not afraid of communicating the truth of what is going on inside of them. They therefore also take the time to understand what is going on inside of their partner. They will listen well, and they will seek to understand. This is essentially what it means to honor someone and show true respect to them. Assertive communicators will protect this value of honor and respect as they interact with other people. Assertive people are also fantastic communicators because they are not afraid of being powerful, but they don't use their power to someone else's detriment. They use their power in their communication to serve someone else. In fact, they insist on having two powerful people, and unless both people in the conversation are not equally powerful, they will actually choose to stop the conversation or the communication, to pause it, and to only re-engage with that person when the other person is at a place where they are ready to value the level of respect and honor equally between both parties. An assertive communicator will not allow either party in the conversation to become a T-Rex or a goat, or I didn't say this before, but I kind of like to call the passive aggressive communicator a chocolate-covered dragon. So there's none of these crazy characters that come up or crop up in the communication that you have with an assertive person, because they won't allow it. An assertive person will respond to a passive communicator with the following statement: I understand that you're feeling like that, but what are you going to do about it? And when the passive communicator tries to wiggle out of the responsibility, and they'll probably say something like, I feel like you're trying to make this situation my responsibility, the assertive communicator will say, you're right, it is your responsibility. What are you going to do about it? The assertive communicator to an aggressive person might say something like, I can only talk to you and finish this conversation when you decide to be respectful and when you aim to understand what is going on inside of me and not only speak about yourself, instead of trying to win this conflict. And the assertive communicator with a chocolate-covered dragon, they might reply to a comment something to the extent of, I'd like to continue this conversation a little bit later once you're ready to tell me the truth of what is going on inside of you, and not just pretend. In other words, the assertive communicator is able to set healthy boundaries for how they allow other people to communicate to and with them, and they will not become the victim or the bad guy or the rescuer. Their heart is set on pursuing connection and understanding throughout the communication process, and they demand equal participation from both parties involved in the setup. So the things that you really need to remember when you're communicating, when you're trying to express the truth of what is going on inside of you, the goal is to create understanding between the two of you. The goal is to remain assertive and powerful in your communication. You want to be communicating out of love. You don't want to be afraid of what is going on inside of you, but you want to be taking responsibility for communicating that truth to the person that you're communicating to. You want to be listening, and you want to be reminding them that you care about them. You want to be reminding them that connection is the most important thing. You really want to avoid a relationship killer, and a relationship killer is a message that will disqualify one person's thoughts or feelings or needs in some way. And it most often happens when one person mentions what is going on inside of them and the other person responds with something like, well, that's not logical at all. Or that's just a feeling, so it actually can't be right. Whereas if you listen to what I'm saying, I'm telling you the fact about what is going on. So my way is the logical way. Those statements are going to be relationship killers. They are absolutely going to annihilate intimacy. They're going to annihilate connection, and it's going to be really difficult for the other person to continue equally in the conversation with you when statements like that are used. And if you can do those things really well, I can promise you that your communication journey with other people will be fruitful and wonderful, that you will have two powerful people within the conversation, which is what you want to maintain the whole time, and that your goal to understand each other will be met every time if you can do those things. Thank you for joining with us today.